Our next guest speaker is an intersectional feminist pushing for equitable representation within decision-making for marginalised constituencies, including women of colour and migrant and refugee women. She works within policy and advocacy at a local, national and international level. She believes too that storytelling is a profound value that will really change the world, and it is the stories of the underrepresented constituencies that will actually help to shift the narrative in creating an intergenerational ripple effect towards greater gender equality. We welcome to the stage Youth Representative for UN Women's Global Generation Equality Task Force, Zahra Al Hilaly.
Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are meeting on Indigenous land today. It is such a privilege to be standing on Wajak Noongar Boodja, and as an immigrant to this country, I recognise the vital importance of my role in decolonising the land that we stand on today. Today, as we all come together to celebrate women across the state, across the country, and across the world, we also come together to recognise the grief and the anguish that remains existent within the very steps that we take today. For this week alone has reminded us again, for many of us, speaking up against the patriarchy that is an endemic is life-threatening. The rhetoric of this existence, of our existence being detrimental, wafts within the air that we breathe. But I am exhausted. We are here again, expected to contort our emotions and avoid speaking of the battles that we have fought to be here today. I often ask myself, why is the strength of a woman so intimidating to the eyes of the public? Why do our unwavering pleas for change bring you discomfort? Why does our very existence bring you distress? Quite frankly, I don't have the answer to any of these questions. But what I will tell you is that every single woman in this room today is made up of the courage of the women that have come before us and will come after us. The South African proverb of "I am because we are" is my reminder that for many of us, our voices are not just the vehicle for telling our stories, but my voice is the recollection of every single woman that has come before me. International Women's Day is not just about celebrating women that have undeniably reformed the way of life and our way of existence. But it is a day to recognise and reflect upon the importance of uplifting the voices that cannot be in this room with us today. For me, it is my sisters of migrant and refugee background, who, like me, have faced the negative implications of the settlement process. It is my sisters of faith, my Muslim sisters, who have been silenced by the cultural implications that are upheld that have upheld the standard of complacent and complicit Muslim women. It is also fellow women of colour that have been institutionally excluded from finding safety in spaces that have been for far too long exclusive. I remember entering into the advocacy space at the young age of 16 and hearing the words, "If you don't have a seat at the table, bring a chair." Coming from a refugee and migrant background, we had faced multiple problems limiting my opportunity to speak up, and finding that chair was almost impossible. Being on the brink of poverty was definitely one of my challenges that I faced. And whilst I am only one of the many who have been left behind from the narrative of change, we often fail to remember that today, as we celebrate International Women's Day, we recognise that there are so many who aren't here to celebrate with us today. In the year 2021 alone, it is more important than ever to ensure that we bring along every last minority and every last woman in fighting for gender equality. For the equality of one is not dependent on those who are fortunate enough to be a part of the discussion for gender equality. It is dependent on every last one of us. For many of us, this day is not just a celebration, but just another reminder that our existence one day may manifest into something tragic, that our existence to the eyes of the patriarchy is a risk. And for me, International Women's Day is both celebration and grief of every woman that has been lost to the hands of patriarchy and inequality. My very own existence has too often been controversial and debatable. Like many women in this room, I have had to ask myself the question on multiple times whether my courage and my strength is more important than my survival. But how can I allow both the concept of justice and my survival to not interlink amongst each other? Are they not both interchangeable? Why should I compromise the very tool that will seek me justice and will ensure my survival? As many women of colour experience, being diminished of your very existence in every space that we are a part of, but being displaced of our courage is relinquishable. The truth is, I am scared. Too often, I am fearful of my own life. How can we continue to fight justice when we have seen our sisters that have come forth before us face the repercussions of their bravery? But it gets tiring to hold my tongue, and with that I say enough. When I was assaulted in 2019, I lost my courage, but it has been the strength of my sisters, especially in the last week, that has reminded me of why we fight. In the past year alone, we have seen the stories of our sisters turned into statistics that were unwaveringly dismissed. I refuse to be another statistics. I refuse to allow my voice and my story to be faltered in fear that my very voice will just be another lost within the noise that is continued to be made by those who fear us. It is time to be the light that shines bright enough to lighten the path of another woman who is unable to find the power of her voice. But whilst I have the ability to say enough is enough, I recognize that some of us do not. So I speak with the ferocity of my voice, knowing that I, or rather every single woman in this room, has found the ability to freely utilize her voice in a recollection and as a megaphone of the voices that have been silenced. As mentioned in celebration today, we recognize that we cannot ignore that in the past year alone, we have lost so many of our sisters to the pandemic, to climate change, to domestic violence, and to the plethora of issues that continue to disproportionately affect women. This year alone, we have grieved beyond what I had thought would be humanly possible, but we cannot stop fighting. We cannot stop because the path that we are on is the very path that has been paved by women who have lost their lives for us to be here today. My friends, if 2021 has taught me one great lesson already, it is that we cannot be complacent and we cannot be complicit about how we are being treated. For far too long, we have been silenced with the fear that our words will shift the narrative that is disguised as equality. We have learnt that there are challenges that lie ahead of us, and there is no denying that the path to achieving equality will be an easy one, because it won't and it never will be. But we must recognize that we are all standing in this room today because of the women that have come before us. We must make sure that the path is broad enough for the future generation that will be an equal space. Now, before I exit off the floor, in natural Zahra style, I cannot exit the floor without some words in my preferred art form of poetry. My mother once told me that the voice of a woman would be the greatest weapon to reform. Our voice, an enraged tornado of every plea of mercy. Our voice, a body of the tears that have travelled through the thick smog of an endless storm. Our voice to society, to our culture, to the patriarchy, a controversy. We have come from the spirits that have been sought to be tamed, from the constellation of a celestial sphere binding our hearts together, but from the fire that continues to cultivate from what was once a flame. But we are tired of fighting in a dilapidated world of black and white, where our voices are the only colour that provide us with that 1 ounce of hope. That maybe our palpitating chants of our global sisterhood will shine so bright. And that one day we will welcome that light, inciting a world of colour and confidence. But when the placid body of water transforms into a wave that has crashed, remember the feet that have marched and the voices that echo pleas from the past. Because we will forever be them and they will forever be us. Thank you so much, everyone.